Simon of Cyrene was a spectator at the crucifixion. He's only in the synoptic gospels. The synoptics are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We don't see Simon in John. In Matthew, the verse that we heard this morning, we learn his name and we learn that he's from Cyrene. And in Luke 23:26, we get one more detail, that he was coming into the city, coming in from the country. Mark, which is really the first of those three gospels, gives us the most information. Mark 15:21 tells us that he was a passerby. He might not have even intended to stop and witness this brutal punishment. Mark also tells us that he's the father of Alexander and Rufus. I don't know who Alexander is, but Rufus comes up again. And like Chekhov's gun, characters in the Bible who get a name get their name for a reason. In case you don't remember Chekhov's gun, the Russian novelist and playwright said, if you're going to have a gun on the stage in Act 1, it had better go off in Act 2. So we get these two characters' names, and it seems that it's because they have some significance, including Simon. Now, I told you I don't know who Alexander is, but at the very end of Romans, when Paul is sending all of his personal greetings, say hi to so-and-so, give my best wishes to her, and give my thanks for his service, he also says, send my greetings to Rufus. And scholars think that this is probably the Rufus mentioned in Mark and Simon of Cyrene's son. Why is this important? Why bring it up? Because it places this bystander, this passerby who is pressed into service, into the life of the ancient church. He represents the three worlds of the New Testament. He represents the Hellenist world, the Roman world, and the Jewish world. We get all of this because his son's names suggest not only is he Jewish, but he's also of Rome. And when we hear that city of origin, Cyrene, we see that he is part of that Hellenist world. In this short little reference, we get a peek into what makes up the gospel. We meet this minor character who sort of embodies the identity of the early church. What about Cyrene? What does that have to do with anything? And what does that tell us? We'll come back to that in just a second. Notice this detail that the early church is represented not by somebody who volunteered, who said, oh, pick me, take me, but by someone who was chosen and then compelled to service. Simon of Cyrene, this symbolic representative of everything in those first moments of what was about to become Christianity, didn't even volunteer. Didn't even call the nominating committee and ask where he could serve. He didn't get up, he didn't come forward. He may have even just been passing through. God chose him not directly, but through a surrogate. And who was the surrogate? God's surrogate was a Roman guard on his way to enact capital punishment on Jesus. Putting all these pieces together, this is an inauspicious way to draw people into service. Oh, that God would deem us worthy to be pushed from the sideline, from the comfortable place as a bystander, and into the game. God can use anyone. In this case, we can borrow David Tracy's concept of using our own experience to better understand God and what God is doing in this passage. And we can imagine Simon's scene in all three of these synoptic gospels. A guard sees him. The guard sees that Jesus is struggling and not likely to make it even to the point of execution, and presses him into service. That's it. But this simple act, this moment of being drawn in to help carry the cross, was a transformative experience. What happened? What happened? Did it look like our artwork where he was helping prop up the cross? Did it look like him taking it completely and carrying it while the bedraggled Jesus followed? What did Simon experience in that moment? No longer was he just passing by. No longer was he a spectator. Somehow, in this story, he's in. What does it mean to be a spectator? When are we called to leave the sidelines and get involved? I have firsthand experience as a spectator, standing on the sidelines, watching the action. I coach a U15 boys soccer team. And so each Saturday I get the experience of standing there and shouting things, but having no impact in the way the game is played. U15 means that these boys are between around 12 and no older than 15. And so right away you can see that it's been a long, long time since I would qualify to be in that game. But there are times when I'm watching it and I can see from my perspective as a spectator what they should be doing. And I shout things that are so incredibly helpful. Switch sides. Close that gap. Pass it to him. I asked a couple of the boys, I was giving them a ride home, one of them is my son, what do they hear the most from the sideline? And they said, good job. That's not bad. I felt pretty good about myself. Because as I think about what goes through my head, good job isn't always the phrase that comes to mind. Some of you know about being a spectator. In the same way you watched the UVA men's basketball team progress this season, you may have wanted to jump in the game. Especially this past week, the other day, you may have felt like, if I could just get in there, I know what they should be doing. But I just want to assure you that if you had been allowed to jump onto the court, it probably wouldn't have given you better results. Sometimes standing on the sideline as a spectator is the place we should be. I have no business out there with these boys. They're younger and faster. I'm, let's just say, older and not as fast. And those men playing basketball have been working at it for a very long time. So for those situations, our place is on the sideline. This morning, I'm not talking about a game. I'm not talking about something where we have no business getting involved. I'm talking about life and faith and not waiting for someone to compel us to join in. It's about stepping away from the other spectators, owning our faith journey, owning our Lenten journey, and making positive decisions for God's glory. It's about reaching out, finding what excites us about God and our church, and drawing other people in. God is inclusive of all humanity, and we see that even in Jesus' final, not even days, final moments. Simon of Cyrene was African. The ancient city of Cyrene was near present-day Shahat, Libya. The African depicted on the front of your bulletin is probably a more accurate depiction than the masterworks of my favorite Renaissance and Baroque artists. In that moment of picking a spectator to help Jesus carry the cross, the guard not only encapsulated the early church, the Hellenists, the Jewish, and the Roman world, the guard became God's voice to say, all are welcome, no matter who you are, what you look like, or where you come from. You don't have to be from Jerusalem. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be Roman. Everyone is included in this. As we climb inside this story, we are all on this Lenten journey, headed toward the glory and wonder of Easter. So I return to some of the ideas we looked at last week. Has anyone adopted anything for Lent? Do you remember last week when I questioned giving up something for Lent? And I did hear from more than a couple people about the reasons that we pick on chocolate so much, or coffee. But I suggested last week that we could take something on, feast on faith, feed on hope, focus our attention on prayer, adopt a spirit of gratitude, seek to be more patient, and look for positives around us. Each action from last week can become a part of God speaking love and redemption into a fallen world. Each one of those actions, those positive actions, has a role to play in this game of life. And none of it involves fading back into the sideline, hoping that that guard who is coming by won't notice us. We need to get into the game, not because someone's pushing us forward or we feel guilted into it or for some other negative reason, but because we're excited about it. And we want to join in what Jesus is doing. We want to get involved. Thinking about Simon and his move from spectator to participant led me to think about other times when I've been a spectator. My mind went back to August 12th of 2017 when the Unite the Right planned their rally. And on that day, many of you know, I planned to stay away from the downtown area completely. But in the end, I really couldn't bring myself to do that and rode my bike down and watched what was happening. I could see the hatred in people's eyes, hear the shouts, smell the tear gas, hear the yelling. I wasn't present when a man drove his car into the crowd, killing Heather Heyer. But as I reflected on Jesus' passion and Simon of Cyrene's role in helping him carry his cross, I thought back to that day. I thought about my role and wondered, should I have done something different? Should I have gotten more involved? This past December, a jury found James Fields guilty of driving his car into the crowd where Heather Heyer lost her life. This past week, there was another mass shooting in the world, this time in New Zealand, and 50 people lost their lives. As I thought about this, thought about Simon, thought about this idea of not being a spectator to life, I thought back again to August 12th. How could I have gotten in the game? Could I have helped James Fields see that the world is full of love and possibility and God is active and involved? Could I help him realize that he doesn't need such hatred? And then I realized there are people like him all over the world. He didn't need me that day. He had sown the seeds of hatred long before then. He needed someone to show him God's love years earlier. He needed the transformative power of Jesus Christ before August 12th. We can't wait until the car is racing toward the crowd to say Jesus loves you. We can't wait until the gunman is headed to the mosque to say, why do you feel the need for such violence? Consider another example. This beautiful space, this sanctuary. We don't wait until this building is on fire to consider fire prevention and to pay our insurance premium. We plan ahead. We make sure that the insurance is paid. We make sure that the fire extinguishers all receive their inspections. We make sure that people know where they are. And we try to do other things to avoid that from happening. Faith is the same way. Every Lenten season, we prepare for Easter. The part we can miss is helping others prepare too. It's far easier to prepare as a spectator on the sideline than as a participant who's deep involved and trying to share it and get other people involved. Just like it's easier for me to coach soccer than to actually run around for 90 minutes, which I couldn't physically do. I can yell all I want, but as I stand on the sidelines shouting encouragement, I burn no calories. The kids are the ones who are playing the game, just like the UVA men's basketball team are the ones who are actually out there. Wolfhart Pannenberg once said, "The evidence for Jesus' resurrection is so strong that no one would question it except for two things. First, it's a very unusual event. Don't worry, the second is where we get the rub. Second, if you believe it happened, you should have to change the way you live. If we show up for church and go through the motions, but never change, never get involved, never get off the sideline, never get in the game, never find our passion, we might as well just stay on the bench." But you know what? I look out, and I've gotten to know many of you very well. That's not who you are. That's not who we are as a people. We are a get off the bench people. We are a get in the game people. Feast on faith this season. Feed on the hope of everlasting life in Christ. Focus on prayers. And if you don't have your own prayer, listen to words of wonder and beauty like the one Will just offered to God. Adopt a spirit of gratitude. There are so many things for which we can be grateful. All we have to do is open our eyes to see it. Seek patience and look for the positives. God is at work, God is active, and God is drawing us, not back, but forward. We're no longer spectators. We're in the game. I pray our lives may reflect it. Amen.